What if the Moroccan crisis had sparked World War I? Many say that the First World War, also known as the Great War, was inevitable to happen, and I completely agree with that. Even if the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, wasn't assassinated in Bosnia, something else would have sparked the war. The reason for that is the high tensions between the world powers. Today, we will be taking a look into a scenario where the First World War starts 3 years earlier than in our timeline, and what would happen if the Moroccan crisis had sparked World War I. At the time, Morocco was one of the few African nations that weren't colonized by an European power. With the Berlin Conference in 1885, Africa was split up among the European powers in advance, just to avoid conflict between them. The territories that the great powers agreed to were theirs, they didn't actually control just yet. Morocco is such an example. France was going to take control over Morocco, but Germany opposed it. In 1905, Kaiser Wilhelm II landed in the city of Tangier and announced that he supports an independent Morocco. This way, Germany would have weakened their rival, the French. A conference was held the next year in 1906 in the city of Algeciras, where Britain officially supported France. This is important since the two nations became friendly towards each other and wary of German aggression. So, Germany had strengthened their enemies. The point of diverge in today's video is going to be based around the Second Moroccan Crisis, also known as the Agadir Crisis. In 1911, a rebellion against the ruling Sultan in Morocco broke out in Fez, which is the nation's capital. Germany believed that the French had sponsored the revolt, so they can have an excuse to occupy Morocco. The Moroccan Sultan had asked France for help, and an army was sent there to put down the rebellion. Again, Germany didn't want France to have Morocco, and didn't want to be diplomatically defeated, as they were in 1906. The Germans sent a gunboat to the city of Agadir. This exchange was fair since France had sent their army to protect French interests, and Germany had sent their navy to protect German interests. The Germans expected France to take over Morocco, but wanted something in compensation as to not allow their rival country to grow stronger without a fight. In 1911, Germany, Britain and France had prepared for war, but Germany ended up backing down, so peace was preserved for another year. The Germans were compensated with some land in Africa around Cameroon and Congo, which I would argue is a bad trade. In the end, Morocco became a French protectorate. One positive thing I have to say is that they had very interesting looking coins. What you see on the screen are coins from my personal collection. Notice how much detail there is. Now, back to the video. So what would happen if the war had started between France and Germany in 1911? I bet you won't expect which side is gonna come out victorious, so make sure to watch up until the end of the video to find out. Also, if you end up enjoying the video, I would strongly appreciate if you leave a like and subscribe to the Alternate History Guild channel. This is how Europe looked like in 1911. There are a couple of border changes between this year and the start of the Great War. You might say that the war starting 3 years earlier won't change the outcome of the war if the same factions end up fighting each other. This statement might be right, but that's not the case in this scenario, since there were a couple of European wars that changed the balance of power, especially in the Balkans. To start off with Italy, who had declared war on the Ottoman Empire in 1911, while the Agadir crisis was ongoing and remained unresolved. On my YouTube channel, I made an alternative history about what would happen if the Ottoman Empire managed to be victorious over Italy. You can check that video on the top right corner on your screen. For the purpose of this video, the outcome of the Italo-Turkish War is going to remain the same, with Italy gaining control over Libya. While the Italo-Turkish War was ongoing, the Balkan states of Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece and Montenegro declared war on the Ottoman Empire. This conflict became known as the First Balkan War. After the Ottomans were defeated in 1912, the spoils of war were divided into the victorious Balkan nations. The Second Balkan War began in 1913, as Bulgaria wanted more land. The Bulgarians ended up being at war with all of their neighboring countries at the same time, and as a result, they lost a lot of land. The Balkan Wars are unlikely to remain the same in this scenario, as for sure the beginning of the First World War will change that. But first, let's look at the factions. Germany and Austria-Hungary would fight together against France and the Russian Empire. The United Kingdom won't join the war initially, just as it was in our timeline. With the war starting that early, the weapons and technology that are being used would be worse than what was used in our timeline. This means more inaccurate artillery, for example, which would increase the casualties on both sides. The Schlieffen Plan was a German plan to conquer France easily. The idea was not to fight France directly on their shared border, since it was heavily fortified on both sides. It was proposed to go through neutral Belgium and the Netherlands and attack France from behind. In our timeline, Germany only attacked Belgium, but in this timeline, a war against the Netherlands would be necessary to complete the Schlieffen Plan. This would draw Britain into the conflict, just as it was in our timeline. Russia would be extremely weak in this scenario, as the war would begin earlier and they were just starting to industrialize. This means that the Russians would benefit from late war, not an early war. Also, a couple of years prior in 1906, they were humiliated by Japan in the Russo-Japanese War. Germany and Austria-Hungary would easily push across the border and have respectable success. The Polish city of Łódź would be captured, with Warsaw being threatened. Germany would have great success pushing into the Benelux, as the neutral nations weren't prepared for the war at all. French and British troops would flood in to save what remains of Belgium and the Netherlands. The Belgian city of Namur was captured, with the capital city of Brussels being in sight. Meanwhile in Africa, the German colonies were losing ground, with the colony of Togoland being overrun and taken by the Entente. The Balkans are known for being very chaotic, but in this scenario they are at peace. This wouldn't last for long, as the Balkan nations would declare war on the Ottoman Empire, just like they did in the First Balkan War. The Ottoman Empire, feeling like they were going to lose, had to join a faction. You might be surprised that in this scenario they chose to join the Entente. Now let me explain why. There is one very big reason for that, and that is oil. The British fleet had just stopped using coal to power their navy, and instead they were using oil coming from Persia. If the Ottoman Empire had joined with Germany, the British navy would be rendered useless and it couldn't be powered. And as a result of them joining the Entente, the Balkan nations would join Germany's faction, the Central Powers. Serbia and Austria-Hungary would be on the same team, which you might say is unrealistic, and to be fair, you're right, but I feel like at the time Serbia hated more the Ottomans, so they would be glad to secure their claims with any help. Back on the front line between France and Germany, the Germans would hold their ground in Alsace-Lorraine, the French would try an attack in the Ardennes, which would have some minor success, the Germans would counterattack and advance towards the city of Verdun. They would prefer to encircle the French army and have the upper hand, rather than to simply march on Paris. In 1913, 2 years after the war had officially started, the front line looked like this. In the Balkans, with Austrian help, the Ottoman Empire was pushed back near the city of Constantinople. The Greeks would lose the island of Crete due to a naval invasion from the United Kingdom. The Balkan nations started to negotiate what the borders between them should look like, but they couldn't agree on anything. As time goes by, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to agree. They would even fight each other over some cities. In Russia, the things are looking dire. The Russians hadn't won any decisive battle. The Austrians took control over the city of Zhytomyr and the Germans the city of Riga. Ukraine, the breadbasket of the Russian Empire, was in danger. The population in Russia was starving, and a revolt to take down the incompetent Tsar was brewing. Germany had pretty much lost all of their valuable colonies, and the ones that remained didn't have any significant value to change the outcome of the region. The tide of the war would turn against the Central Powers, as Italy and Romania would join on the opposite side, the Entente. Italy didn't support Germany in the Moroccan crisis, which means that there is no way Italy is going to join the German faction. The Italians wanted to take some land away from Austria-Hungary and to establish a protectorate over Albania. Meanwhile, the Romanians claimed all of this land. They struck the Bulgarians by surprise, crossing the Danube River and taking control over South Dobruja. The Romanians also had some success pushing into Transylvania, but it was limited due to the mountainous terrain. Up north, the Russians would lose a key battle near the city of Minsk, where the Russians had stored a lot of their grain. Losing their grain storage to Germany started a famine which turned into riots. Lenin had arrived in Petrograd and the revolution had just started. The Italians would struggle to make any sort of gains due to the terrain being extremely mountainous. The Austrians would easily stand their ground and even launch a counterattack with German help, of course. Italy started losing ground and the front line had stopped just short of the city of Venice. On the French border, things were looking good for Germany. That was until the Battle of Mulhouse, where an artillery shell destroyed a bridge across the Rhine River. The German soldiers panicked when the French had started their offensive from the west and the north. Mulhouse was a major supply hub for the region, and if the Germans had lost it, they would most likely lose the entire region of Alsace-Lorraine. The Germans had to act fast, sending reinforcements from neighboring Metz and troops away from the front line. With the battle ongoing for several days, the French tested an attack around the city of Metz. The attack wasn't meant to take the city, but to serve as a distraction. When the French launched their attack, however, they found out that the region is poorly defended and marched forward, taking the city. Not so long after that, the city of Mulhouse fell in French hands and the front line crumbled, with Germany only controlling the city of Strasbourg for now. The European population was tired of the war and saw it as pointless. Let me remind you that the war had started 3 years earlier than in our timeline, and the technology wasn't so advanced. This means that there were for sure going to be more casualties in this scenario. With a higher death toll and no results to show for it, people from all sides started to call for peace. The 34th Infantry Division, commanded by the German General von der Marwitz, was tasked with retaking the city of Metz. The soldiers, however, disobeyed the order and turned around and protested in Frankfurt. Cracks were starting to show on all sides. Meanwhile, Russia was in a full-blown civil war. The communists had established control over the capital city of Petrograd and the territory of Estonia. Finland was the first place to declare independence from the Russians. The government of Russia was forced to sign the peace treaty of Brest-Litovsk, a humiliating peace treaty, but they had to do it in order to win against the communists. On the 1st of May 1914, after more than 3 years of bloody fighting, the last shot was fired. A peace treaty was signed by the Entente and the Central Powers, where they would discuss how to reshape the continent. They signed the peace treaty because of the unrest they were having, and the European nations saw what happened to Russia and didn't want to suffer the same fate. The European continent was left without a clear winner after the deadliest war in human history at the time. This left a lot of countries unhappy with the current situation, as they felt that they deserved more. I made a part 2 on this alternative scenario on my YouTube channel. Watch the video on the screen if you want to see what would happen if nobody had won World War I. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.